Now, putting everything else aside, I'll recap what my research was really about. I grew up younger than the people in the 60s. I was only, at the most, 11 or 12 years old when a psychologist from the University of Pittsburgh took me to see hair. I think I was about 10. And I had heard that Ronald Reagan was out to draft young people for this immoral war. I used to watch kids getting beaten on the head on television. When I was 8 or 9 years old, my mother was in the hospital from hemorrhage after she went to the March on Washington and got tear gassed, quote unquote. So, my sister was always upset. I learned from her the speech she gave that steelworkers had spat on her on the peace march. I mean, Kennedys were killed, King was killed. It was a madhouse. And everybody who was older than me was into drugs, and there was nobody to babysit me, so I got exposed to everything. But when I was in a entry level position in a library and Reagan came to power, we had moved to get away from the truly horrible ordeal that I went through as a child. And I didn't have much to go on, but he seemed to be the way people were describing him, sort of a maniac and a demagogue and a personality cult leader who thought that nuclear war was Jesus. It was weird to me. Couldn't, I mean, reason with him about ecology at all. I was very disappointed that he was elected. And did my best to try to reassure myself by writing articles that were civilized of a different opinion. And there was a lot of Howard Stern reactionary force going on because of the AIDS attack and the mudslinging that was going on. And it seemed like taking sides in that, we're going to have a discussion about what insulting language was about. Salman Rushdie, what is a satanic verse? Of course, I didn't know anything about that was the letters from childhood from a 12-year-old Israeli. I mean, were just overlooked. They were with my autograph book from grade school. I mean, people make it out to be something. Like a whole big thing about my character, but a child puts things away from school. They just seem to be highly strange infatuation letters. And they got put away. So there's no truth to any of the mentality that was brought to the table by the crazies behind the operation and the queers who they hired because people will do what they're told to do when they're hired. There's no truth to any of it. I mean, it's a perfectly normal thing to do. I didn't hide them. They were in the dining room cabinet. But I was very, very concerned about the dehumanization of the victims of AIDS when it happened, mostly men in California. And I got pretty worked up about it. My mother says I was terrified of AIDS. Well, somebody was threatening me. Now, I didn't know they'd used a nerve agent on me. But it seemed to me that They were going to run entrapments so that they could tattoo people who were out of line, which, growing up in a Jewish Holocaust survivor community, had certain kinds of overtones I didn't like, and I wondered if a designer history wasn't repeating itself. And no sooner I get this call from Zell. Now, they were rigging it up with rejected lover stories. Oh, she had the right to reject you and you cried because you had a neuroplasm. And they were saying, getting girls to say, oh, target me and say, oh, you were on drugs and now you can't handle girls. And that was the sing-song story the Yoko One's were poaching by. And they had a syndicate in the Jewish community of girls doing this yeah stuff at me. They were saying, "Oh, he's going to flip out." Willie Wadmaker, the neurologist who gave me the nerve agent tactically through an attack squad, used to sit there tapping, rotating a Coke bottle until it shattered. It was a magic trick he used to do for fun. He'd sit at the curb and really lightly tap a Coke bottle until it exploded. And this is what they were hoping to do, gaslight the queer bait. And this was obvious. And Zoe was in the Gurdjieff Society. And I had come to believe that the prominent people in Iraq were on the right side of the issue because Zappa was protesting. It was a front, I know, no, but I didn't know that at the time. Which, like putting my letters away as a child, was perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to think, oh, Zappa's on the right side of things. Peter Gabriel's with Amnesty International. It's perfectly normal. Say maybe he will understand the situation of how I was tortured because the word entered my vocabulary. I didn't know anything about law except that the legal department at the University of Pittsburgh was selling a song and dance about lying if you have to, but always win, which I didn't like. My father was ethical. He was in philosophy of ethics. I said, my father has a stake in this campus and its rhetoric. And they started showing up. I kid you not, one kid showed up in a black, highly expensive warlord officer's outfit with swastikas from Nazi Germany. And apparently Wesley Posvar was the brains behind him coming and saying he'd like to toast the glass with me and stuff. The University of Pittsburgh was criminally psychotic. That was obvious. So I knew that something was wrong with the Pennsylvania system of administration. And they were laughing about luring me into a sexual peep for extermination politics. And they got the queers to say, well, why didn't you stop having sex? I mean, don't you want these people investigated? Doesn't make any sense at all. So when I learned that Sean Straub was part of the Jewish community, I had suspected, before I identified Sean Straub, I put up a flare. Somebody in the Green Party who's Jewish gave himself AIDS. It's the only thing that can explain all this. And sure enough, there was a kid who matched that description with the very letters in meaning in his last name is Gail Burston. Burston and Straub have the same explosive connotation, Strobe and Straub, and the same letters. And he was right outside the Dakota with Lennon and Mark David Chapman when they pulled this farce. This little Elizabeth and Theodore triangle that they've been working to death through the Green Party in Seattle. I just got warnings about, from prompts from Norton Security. Watch out for, because I went up to this place, the Red Elm Cafe, which has a Black Panther attache, its owner and stuff. And these queers from Auburn, or these trannies from Auburn, come in and put semen in my cup. You see, they see it as an orgy of contagion. And that's not what I was doing. that had nothing, that didn't enter my thinking at all. The girls who came on to me, I accepted because, as I explained to the psychologist for the deaf, I knew that there was an attaché of entrapment who had organized the whole thing. And the arguments about leering at people about sex were part of the psychology of character assassination built into this organization. And in that sense, I was doing something very serious to protect the gay community in Seattle and Pittsburgh and San Francisco, which was my goal. I'm not one of them, no, but I wanted to do my level best if I could to get help, information, and protection to them. And there's nothing they can do to make that any different than what it factually was. So Howard Diversion said, well, you were just sleeping with all these women, is the way it looks like. Was I wrong? Greg Carl then laughed. I said to them, and I said to others in an article I wrote, their overconfidence was my hope. I was investing in making them overconfident. And Will Zell blurted his admission to be talking about injecting people before AIDS was released. He blurted a confession about it, so they're not hiding it. And Greg Carl gave me this thing. He said the persona. I'll try not to make it snotty about the English, but because he's not English, but he's aping the royal parochial. The persona is subjected. I'm trying not to subjected to successive degradations of the X motive. The persona is subjected to successive degradations of the X motive and then subsumed into a larger structure dominated by the adversary. That doesn't sound fascist and crazy to you, and you don't think I should be investigating? Well, your tawdry stupidities are what cost us our grannies. These were people who were behind Flame Over Africa. These were the people behind Flame Over Africa. They're not coming to the rescue. They were behind it. Okay, so I'm not trying to reason with Seattle, Washington. I'm trying to make clear that they are deranged, that they're beyond reach, that we need better administrators. They need to be replaced with people who can coordinate some sort of social protection and public safety in these Hatter operations, Ripper Hatter operations. They come from Roger Waters and the Beatles. That's who that's coming from. Not in what's in on the whole thing. It's the only explanation for any of it. I've racked my brains and done my homework, and that's what happened. They pulled a fast one using the hot wiring system of the entertainment media. And that's why Seattle Times has closed its door to decency and sense. They've locked it up, sealed it shut. No,